The night my family called the police on me, I was standing barefoot in my own living room, holding a stack of documents I wasn't supposed to see, listening to my aunt scream that I was a thief who had finally been caught. They thought fear would break me. They were wrong. They didn't know that in that exact moment, everything they had worked so hard to hide was already falling apart. My name is Monica. I am 23 years old, and this is the story of how the people who raised me tried to destroy my life, and how their lies ended up destroying theirs instead. I grew up believing I was lucky. That's the lie I swallowed for years. My parents weren't rich, but we lived comfortably. A clean house, family dinners, holidays where everyone smiled too wide and spoke too politely. I was taught early to be grateful, to never ask questions, to never challenge elders. Family is everything, my mother used to say, pressing a kiss to my forehead whenever I looked uncertain. I believed her because I wanted to, because children always do. Things changed the year my father died. I was 17. One moment he was laughing at the kitchen table, teasing me about my terrible coffee, and the next moment he was gone. Heart attack. Sudden. No warnings, no goodbyes. My mother collapsed into grief that night, and I became invisible. From that day on, decisions were made without me, conversations stopped when I entered the room, and my name was spoken only when something needed to be done. I cooked, cleaned, stayed quiet, and learned quickly that silence made life easier. After the funeral, my Uncle Mark began visiting more often. He was my father's older brother, always well-dressed, always smiling like he knew something you didn't. He handled paperwork, or at least that's what everyone said. I was told not to worry about adult matters. Just focus on school, my mother said, avoiding my eyes. I trusted them. I shouldn't have. When I turned 18, I asked a simple question. It still echoes in my head. Did Dad leave anything for me? The room went cold. My Aunt Denise laughed awkwardly. My uncle cleared his throat. My mother's face hardened. Your father had debts, she said. There was nothing left. I nodded, embarrassed for asking, ashamed for wanting something from a man who was already gone. That shame kept me quiet for years. I moved out at 21 with nothing but clothes and a secondhand laptop. I worked 2 jobs, studied at night, and told myself independence was freedom. I didn't know I was still being watched. I didn't know decisions about my life were still being made behind closed doors. The first crack in their story came from a stranger. I was working late at a small accounting firm, filing receipts, when an elderly man approached my desk. He looked confused, nervous. He asked my name twice, like he needed to be sure. When I told him, his hands started shaking. You look just like your father, he said softly. Then he leaned closer and whispered words that made my stomach drop. Did they ever tell you about the trust? I laughed. I actually laughed because it sounded ridiculous. A trust? For me? I told him he must be mistaken. He shook his head slowly. I was your father's business partner, he said. I watched him set it up. He wanted to protect you. My heart started racing. I asked him where he got that information. He hesitated, then slid a folded card across my desk. If you want answers, he said, call this number, but be careful who you tell. I didn't sleep that night. I stared at the ceiling, replaying every memory, every conversation, every time I was told there was nothing left. By morning, fear had turned into something sharper, suspicion. I made the call during my lunch break, hiding in a stairwell like I was committing a crime. The lawyer's voice was calm, professional, and devastating. Yes, there was a trust. Yes, it was substantial. No, I was never supposed to be excluded. The documents showed signatures I recognized, my uncle's, my mother's, my aunt's, all approving amendments that redirected everything. We assumed you were aware, he said gently. You were listed as notified. I felt sick. I asked him for copies. He hesitated, then agreed to send them to a secure email. You should come in, he added. And Monica, don't confront them yet. I didn't listen to that last part. That evening, I drove to my mother's house unannounced. I walked into the living room where they were already gathered, laughing like nothing was wrong. When I asked about the trust, the laughter stopped instantly. My uncle stood up slowly. My aunt's face went pale. My mother didn't speak at all. "You weren't supposed to know about that," my uncle said. That sentence changed everything. I asked why my name had been removed. My aunt accused me of being ungrateful. My uncle said I was too young to manage money. My mother finally spoke, her voice cold and controlled. "We did what was best for the family." I asked them whose family they meant. That's when the shouting began. Accusations flew. Greed, disrespect, betrayal. My aunt called me a liar. My uncle said I was mentally unstable. My mother said I was breaking her heart. And when I pulled out my phone and told them I had copies of the documents, something in their eyes shifted. Fear. That night ended with my uncle pointing a finger at me and saying, "If you take this any further, you'll regret it." I left shaking, but I wasn't scared anymore. I was awake. 2 days later, the police knocked on my door. They said my family had reported stolen documents, forged signatures, and threats. They searched my apartment while my neighbors watched. I sat on the couch, hands clenched, listening to my name being dragged through the dirt by the people who raised me. But here's what they didn't know. I had already met the lawyer in person. I had already given him everything. I had already started a process they could no longer stop. And the documents they claimed were stolen? Copies. Every original was still exactly where the law required it to be. As the officers left, one of them paused and looked at me carefully. "You should be careful who you trust," he said quietly. I smiled for the first time in days, because I had stopped trusting them a long time ago, and this was only the beginning. The next morning, my phone started ringing before sunrise. I didn't answer it. I watched the screen light up again and again, my uncle's name flashing like a warning sign. By the time it finally stopped, there were 7 missed calls and 3 voicemails I refused to open. I already knew what they would say. I had crossed an invisible line, and now they were scrambling to pull me back into place. I went to work like nothing had happened. That was my first quiet act of revenge. I smiled at my coworkers, finished my tasks, answered emails, and waited. Around noon, my lawyer called. His tone was calm, but there was something sharp underneath it. He told me the police report my family filed had backfired. False accusations tend to do that when evidence exists. He said my uncle had already contacted him, demanding an emergency meeting. I told him to schedule it. I wanted them to sit across from me and explain their version of family. That evening, I opened the voicemails. My aunt was crying, saying there had been a misunderstanding. My mother sounded exhausted, pleading for me to come home so we could talk privately. My uncle's message was different, controlled, cold. He said legal action would ruin everyone and that I needed to be smart. I replayed that one twice. It confirmed everything. The meeting was set for Friday. 3 days felt like a lifetime. I spent them rereading the documents, learning words I'd never thought I'd need, and replaying my childhood in my head with new understanding. Every birthday gift that felt smaller than it should have, every conversation that ended abruptly when I entered the room, every reminder to stay humble. They weren't teaching me humility, they were teaching me obedience. On Friday morning, I wore the simplest outfit I owned. No jewelry, no makeup. I wanted to look harmless. People underestimate harmless women. They were already seated when I arrived. My uncle at the center, confident posture cracking just slightly. My aunt avoided eye contact. My mother looked smaller than I remembered, hands folded tightly in her lap. When I sat down, no one spoke. My lawyer broke the silence. He laid out the facts, the dates, the signatures, the amended clauses that conveniently erased my name. The room grew heavier with each sentence. My uncle interrupted, saying everything had been done legally. My lawyer didn't raise his voice. He simply slid a single document across the table, a notarized letter written in my father's handwriting, recorded months before his death, explicitly stating that any attempt to remove me from the trust would invalidate all amendments. My aunt gasped. My mother's face drained of color. My uncle stared at the paper like it had personally betrayed him. That letter had been buried, intentionally. They had assumed no one would ever look for it. My uncle leaned back, suddenly calm again. He said families make mistakes, that this could still be resolved quietly. My lawyer asked him a simple question. Why did you call the police? No one answered. That was when my lawyer explained the consequences: civil liability, criminal investigation for fraud, potential charges for filing a false police report. The words hung in the air like smoke. My aunt started crying. My mother reached for my hand. I pulled away. That movement hurt her more than any accusation ever could. I spoke for the first time. I asked my mother when she decided I didn't deserve the truth. She said she was trying to protect me. I asked her from what? She couldn't answer. The meeting ended without resolution. That was intentional. My lawyer told me later that panic makes people careless. He was right. Within days, cracks began to show. My uncle called again, this time threatening to drag the case out for years. My aunt sent me a message begging forgiveness. My mother showed up at my apartment uninvited, crying in the hallway, telling me I was tearing the family apart. I told her quietly that I wasn't the one who started this. I closed the door while she was still talking. A week later, my lawyer called with news that made my hands shake. An internal audit had been triggered. Accounts were being reviewed, transfers questioned. Money moved in ways that no longer looked like family decisions. It wasn't just about my inheritance anymore. It was about everything they had touched. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at my phone, waiting for the fallout. It came faster than I expected. My aunt was questioned first. She broke quickly. Guilt does that. She admitted she had signed documents without fully understanding them. She admitted my uncle had pressured her. She admitted my mother knew. When my mother was called in, she asked to speak to me. I agreed. We met in a quiet cafe where no one knew us. She looked older, smaller. She said she was afraid of being left with nothing after my father died. She said my uncle convinced her it was temporary. She said she never thought I'd find out. I asked her if she ever planned to tell me. She said no. That was the moment something inside me settled. I stopped hoping for apologies that mattered. I stopped expecting love to look the way it used to. 2 weeks later, my uncle was formally charged. The trust was reinstated under my name. Assets were frozen pending investigation. My lawyer congratulated me. I didn't feel victorious. I felt calm. Calm was better. The final blow came quietly. A letter arrived informing my family that due to legal violations, they were no longer authorized to manage any related accounts. Their access was gone. Their control vanished. My phone buzzed one last time. A message from my uncle. Just 4 words. You didn't have to. I typed back something I had practiced in my head for years. Neither did you. I blocked the number and sat back, breathing for what felt like the first time in my life. But the story wasn't over yet, because justice has consequences, and not all of them are written in court documents.